back to our channel, where we inspire you to be your absolute best self. Today we're diving kind that moves mountains or lifts weights. No, this is deeper. I'm talking about mental, emotional strength, the kind that helps you rise above challenges. Dive into, my friends. Today I want to share a principle that has the power to change your life forever. It's a principle so simple yet so profound, and it is woven into the life of Jesus himself. If you learn to start your day by thanking God, you will unlock the ability to multiply your blessings beyond what you could ever imagine. Gratitude is the gateway to abundance, a principle that resonates deeply within the fabric of creation. It is not merely a polite gesture or a fleeting emotion. It is a spiritual force that aligns our hearts with heaven and unlocks the flow of divine blessings into our lives. The power of gratitude cannot be overstated because it transforms how we see ourselves, our circumstances, and even God. Consider this: everything we possess, no matter how small or great, is a gift from God. Life itself is an unmerited blessing, yet so often we take it for granted. When we wake up in the morning, the very breath in our lungs is evidence of God's goodness. But how often do we pause to acknowledge it? Gratitude begins with recognition, seeing the hand of God in every detail of our lives. It starts by opening our eyes to the reality that even in our moments of lack or difficulty, God's provision is present. A heart of gratitude positions you to receive more. This is because gratitude is not just an acknowledgement. It is a declaration of faith. When you thank God, you are proclaiming, "Lord, I see what you have done, and I trust that you are able to do more." It shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have. And this shift in perspective creates room for God to move. Where there is thankfulness, there is no room for doubt, fear, or complaining. Gratitude pushes these enemies of faith aside and allows trust to take root. Jesus demonstrated this principle with profound clarity. When he faced the challenge of feeding thousands with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, he didn't look at the insufficiency of the resources. Instead, he lifted them to heaven and gave thanks. That act of gratitude unlocked the supernatural power of God and turned a small boy's lunch into a feast for a multitude. The same is true in our lives. When we take what seems insufficient and thank God for it, we invite his power into the situation. Gratitude shifts our mindset from limitation to expectation, from despair to hope. It is important to understand that gratitude is not dependent on circumstances. True gratitude exists not because everything is perfect, but because God is faithful. Even when life feels overwhelming, even when the storm is raging, gratitude reminds us that God is in control. In moments of uncertainty, it anchors our hearts in the truth that his promises are sure. When you start your day with thanksgiving, you open the door to God's abundance. Think about this: if a person gives you a gift and you receive it with joy and appreciation, it pleases the giver and often encourages them to give more. In the same way, when we show gratitude to God, it pleases him and positions us for greater blessings. A thankful heart is a magnet for God's favor because it shows him that we value his work in our lives. Gratitude also changes us. It softens our hearts and makes us more aware of God's presence. When we thank him, we acknowledge that he is the source of all good things. This awareness deepens our relationship with him and increases our capacity to trust him in every area of life. The more we practice gratitude, the more we grow in our understanding of his love and provision. As you go through life, let gratitude become your constant companion. Start each morning by thanking God for his goodness, no matter what lies ahead. When you do, you'll find that gratitude not only unlocks the blessings you need, but also transforms you into a blessing for others. This is the beauty of a thankful heart. It doesn't just receive, it overflows. And in that overflow, the gateway to abundance is not just opened, it becomes a path you walk on daily. Starting with what you have, no matter how small, is a timeless principle that often determines the difference between success and stagnation. This idea is deeply spiritual yet immensely practical, as it calls us to recognize the potential in what we already possess. But too often we fall into the trap of waiting for perfect conditions, greater resources, or more opportunities before taking action. We think that our current situation or possessions are inadequate. And in doing so, we underestimate the power of small beginnings. However, everything extraordinary starts with something seemingly insignificant. What matters is not the size of what you have, but how you value and use it. In the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, a boy brought forward 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. From a logical perspective, that offering was laughably small in the face of such a massive need. But Jesus took what the boy had, lifted it to heaven, gave thanks, and began to distribute it. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. The small lunch was multiplied to feed thousands with 12 baskets of leftovers. This story teaches us that the value of what you have is not in its quantity, but in its surrender to God. When you offer even the smallest of resources with faith and gratitude, it creates the conditions for divine multiplication. The principle applies not just to physical resources, but also to talents, skills, and opportunities. Many people dismiss their abilities because they compare themselves to others. They believe their gift is too small to make a difference. Yet, history is filled with examples of individuals who started with seemingly insignificant talents and changed the world. What they all had in common was the courage to start where they were and the faith to believe that their efforts would grow. Small beginnings, when nurtured and committed to a greater purpose, yield extraordinary results. It's important to recognize that the way you perceive what you have determines how you use it. If you see your resources or abilities as inadequate, you will hesitate to act. But when you view them as seeds with potential, you begin to use them wisely and faithfully. Seeds are small, but within them lies the blueprint for multiplication. A farmer doesn't despise a handful of seeds. Instead, he plants them with the expectation of a harvest. Similarly, we must view what we have as seeds meant to be planted, cultivated, and multiplied. Another vital aspect of starting with what you have is learning to be faithful in small things. Jesus taught that those who are faithful with little will be entrusted with much. This principle reveals that how you handle small resources determines whether you are ready for greater ones. Faithfulness is about using what you have to the best of your ability, even when it seems insignificant. It's about being diligent, persistent, and trusting that God will reward your efforts. The small tasks you undertake today may seem mundane, but they are stepping stones to greater opportunities. Starting with what you have also requires an attitude of contentment and trust. Contentment doesn't mean complacency. It means appreciating what you have while believing that God can do more with it. Trusting God with what you have, no matter how small, shows that you believe in His power to multiply and transform it. This trust is an act of faith that invites God's intervention and positions you for growth. The idea of starting with what you have is not limited to material things. It includes your time, your relationships, and even your challenges. Every moment and every situation is an opportunity to grow and serve. When you focus on using what you have instead of fixating on what you lack, you unlock creativity, resourcefulness, and divine favor. The key is to stop waiting for more and start using what's already in your hands. So look around you and take inventory of your life. What do you have that you've been overlooking? Is it a skill, a small platform, or an idea? Whatever it is, offer it to God with gratitude and start using it today. Remember, greatness often begins with something small, and God specializes in turning little into much. The moment you stop underestimating what you have and start using it with faith, you set the stage for growth, multiplication, and transformation. Starting with what you have, no matter how small, is a timeless principle that often determines the difference between success and stagnation. This idea is deeply spiritual yet immensely practical, as it calls us to recognize the potential in what we already possess. Too often we fall into the trap of waiting for perfect conditions, greater resources, or more opportunities before taking action. We think that our current situation or possessions are inadequate, and in doing so, we underestimate the power of small beginnings. However, everything extraordinary starts with something seemingly insignificant. What matters is not the size of what you have, but how you value and use it. In the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, a boy brought forward 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. From a logical perspective, that offering was laughably small in the face of such a massive need. But Jesus took what the boy had, lifted it to heaven, gave thanks, and began to distribute it. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. The small lunch was multiplied to feed thousands with 12 baskets of leftovers. This story teaches us that the value of what you have is not in its quantity, but in its surrender to God. When you offer even the smallest of resources with faith and gratitude, it creates the conditions for divine multiplication. The principle applies not just to physical resources, but also to talents, skills, and opportunities. Many people dismiss their abilities because they compare themselves to others. They believe their gift is too small to make a difference. Yet, history is filled with examples of individuals who started with seemingly insignificant talents and changed the world. What they all had in common was the courage to start where they were and the faith to believe that their efforts would grow. Small beginnings, when nurtured and committed to a greater purpose, yield extraordinary results. It's important to recognize that the way you perceive what you have determines how you use it. If you see your resources or abilities as inadequate, you will hesitate to act. But when you view them as seeds with potential, you begin to use them wisely and faithfully. Seeds are small, but within them lies the blueprint for multiplication. A farmer doesn't despise a handful of seeds. Instead, he plants them with the expectation of a harvest. Similarly, we must view what we have as seeds meant to be planted, cultivated, and multiplied. Another vital aspect of starting with what you have is learning to be faithful in small things. Jesus taught that those who are faithful with little will be entrusted with much. This principle reveals that how you handle small resources determines whether you are ready for greater ones. Faithfulness is about using what you have to the best of your ability, even when it seems insignificant. It's about being diligent, persistent, and trusting that God will reward your efforts. The small tasks you undertake today may seem mundane, but they are stepping stones to greater opportunities. Starting with what you have also requires an attitude of contentment and trust. Contentment doesn't mean complacency, it means appreciating what you have while believing that God can do more with it. Trusting God with what you have, no matter how small, shows that you believe in His power to multiply and transform it. This trust is an act of faith that invites God's intervention and positions you for growth. The idea of starting with what you have is not limited to material things. It includes your time, your relationships, and even your challenges. Every moment and every situation is an opportunity to grow and serve. When you focus on using what you have instead of fixating on what you lack, you unlock creativity, resourcefulness, and divine favor. The key is to stop waiting for more and start using what's already in your hands. So look around you and take inventory of your life. What do you have that you've been overlooking? Is it a skill, a small platform, or an idea? Whatever it is, offer it to God with gratitude and start using it today. Remember, greatness often begins with something small, and God specializes in turning little into much. The moment you stop underestimating what you have and start using it with faith, you set the stage for growth, multiplication, and transformation. Thanksgiving invokes divine power, unlocking supernatural intervention in ways that defy human logic. It is not just a gesture of politeness or an act of courtesy. It is a spiritual weapon that shifts circumstances and invites the miraculous. When you choose to give thanks, you are engaging in an act of faith that connects you to God's limitless power. Gratitude, especially in challenging times, is a declaration that God is able and willing to work on your behalf. It opens the door for Him to move in extraordinary ways, turning what seems impossible into a testimony of His greatness. Throughout the Bible, we see how thanksgiving precedes miracles. Before Jesus performed some of His most remarkable acts, He gave thanks. When standing before the tomb of Lazarus, Jesus lifted His voice and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." He thanked God before the miracle occurred, not after. This demonstrates that thanksgiving is not just a response to God's goodness, but a catalyst for it. By giving thanks, Jesus aligned Himself with God's will and power, setting the stage for Lazarus to rise from the dead. Similarly, when faced with a crowd of thousands and only 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus didn't complain about the lack of resources. Instead, He lifted what He had to heaven, gave thanks, and then distributed it. What happened next was nothing short of supernatural. A small boy's lunch fed a multitude with leftovers to spare. Thanksgiving shifts our perspective from the natural to the supernatural. It acknowledges that God is not limited by what we see or understand. When you thank God in advance, you are expressing confidence in His ability to intervene, regardless of how dire the situation looks. This act of faith not only pleases God, but also activates His power in ways that surpass our expectations. Faith-filled gratitude says, Lord, I trust you even when I don't see the way forward. I know you are able to do exceedingly, abundantly above all I can ask or imagine. One of the reasons Thanksgiving is so powerful is that it redirects our focus. When faced with difficulties, it is easy to become consumed by fear, doubt, or frustration. These emotions can cloud our vision and hinder our faith. However, when you choose to give thanks, you shift your attention away from the problem and onto God's faithfulness. Thanksgiving reminds you of what He has already done and strengthens your belief in what He will do. It changes your posture from one of worry to one of expectation, creating an atmosphere where miracles can happen. Thanksgiving also humbles us, acknowledging that all blessings come from God. It positions us to receive because it recognizes our dependence on Him. This humility invites His favor and grace into our lives. When we thank God, we are essentially saying, Lord, I know this situation is beyond me, but it is not beyond you. I trust your power and your plan. This act of surrender allows God to step in and take control, often in ways that surpass our understanding. Moreover, thanksgiving brings peace. The Bible says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Thanksgiving has the unique ability to calm our spirits and reassure us of God's presence. When you give thanks, you release your burdens to Him and invite His peace to fill your heart. This peace is not just a feeling. It is a powerful force that steadies you in the midst of uncertainty and prepares you to witness God's intervention. Even in moments of lack or struggle, thanksgiving is an act of spiritual warfare. It confounds the enemy, who expects you to respond with fear or despair. When you give thanks, you are declaring victory in the face of adversity. This confounds the plans of the enemy and aligns your spirit with God's power. Thanksgiving silences doubt and amplifies faith, creating an environment where miracles are not only possible but inevitable. So whether you are standing before a closed door, a difficult situation, or a seemingly insurmountable challenge, choose to give thanks. Thank God for what He has done, for what He is doing, and for what He is about to do. Trust that your gratitude is unlocking divine power, setting the stage for Him to move mightily in your life. When you embrace the power of thanksgiving, you invite heaven to invade earth, and the impossible becomes reality. Focusing on others rather than just yourself is a principle that leads to true fulfillment and unlocks the multiplication of blessings in your life. The kingdom of God operates on the principle of giving and serving, which directly contrasts with the self-centered nature of the world. When you shift your attention from personal gain to meeting the needs of others, you align yourself with God's heart and open the door for extraordinary growth and impact. One of the most remarkable aspects of Jesus' ministry was His wavering focus on others. Everywhere He went, He prioritized serving, healing, teaching, and providing for people. When He performed miracles, it was not for His own benefit, but to meet the needs of those around Him. The feeding of the 5,000 is a prime example. Jesus didn't multiply the loaves and fish for Himself. He did it to satisfy the hunger of the multitude. This act of selflessness not only met their immediate physical needs, but also revealed the abundance of God's provision. By focusing on others, Jesus demonstrated that blessings are multiplied when shared. When you make others a priority, you reflect God's character. He is a giving God who continuously pours out blessings on His creation. When we follow His example and use our resources, time and abilities to bless others, We become vessels through which His love and provision flow. This mindset shifts our approach to life from one of accumulation to one of contribution. Instead of asking, "What can I get?" we begin to ask, "What can I give?" This shift is transformative, not only for those we serve, but also for ourselves. A life focused on others is a life filled with purpose, joy, and divine favor. One of the most powerful truths about focusing on others is that it creates a cycle of multiplication. When you give generously, you make room for God to replenish and increase what you have. This principle is beautifully illustrated in Proverbs 11:25, which says, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." God's blessings are not meant to be hoarded, they are designed to flow through us to others. As we give, we receive more not so we can accumulate wealth or status, but so we can continue to bless others. The cycle of giving and receiving is God's way of ensuring that His provision never runs dry. Focusing on others also requires us to see beyond ourselves and recognize the needs around us. It's easy to become consumed by our own struggles and challenges. But when we take the time to look outward, we often discover that others are facing even greater difficulties. Meeting those needs, even in small ways, has a profound impact. A kind word, a listened or a simple act of generosity can bring hope, encouragement to someone who desperately needs it. These small gestures, when done with love, carry the power to change lives. Moreover, focusing on others teaches us the importance of stewardship. God has entrusted each of us with resources, whether they be material, relational, or spiritual, and He expects us to use them wisely. Stewardship is not just about managing what we have, it's about using it to serve and bless others. When we are faithful stewards, God entrusts us with more. This principle is evident in the parable of the talents, where those who used their resources effectively were rewarded with even greater responsibilities. When we use what we have to impact others, we demonstrate our faithfulness to God's purposes, and He entrusts us with even greater opportunities. Another powerful outcome of focusing on others is the fulfillment it brings. Many people chase happiness by pursuing personal success, wealth, or status, but true joy comes from serving others. When you make a difference in someone's life, you experience a sense of purpose and connection that material possessions can never provide. This fulfillment is a reflection of God's design for humanity. We were created to live in community and to support one another. And when we embrace this purpose, we find deeper meaning in our lives. Focusing on others also helps us grow spiritually. It teaches us humility as we recognize that life is not just about us. It deepens our faith as we trust God to supply our needs while we meet the needs of others. It strengthens our character as we learn patience, compassion, and selflessness. Serving others shapes us into the image of Christ, who came not to be served but to serve. Ultimately, a life focused on others is a life that mirrors God's love. It is a life that multiplies blessings not just for those we help, but for ourselves as well. When we prioritize others, we unlock the abundance of God's provision, experience the joy of giving, and walk in the purpose for which we were created. By shifting our focus from ourselves to those around us, we become a reflection of God's generosity and a catalyst for His blessings in the world. Faith is the foundation upon which every great accomplishment is built, and it is the key that unlocks God's supernatural power in our lives. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, because faith is what connects us to His promises. When you step out in faith, you are declaring your trust in God's ability to do what He has said, even when the circumstances seem impossible. Faith allows you to see beyond the natural and step into the realm of the supernatural, where God's power operates without limitation. It requires confidence not in what you can do, but in what God can do through you. The Bible is full of examples of individuals who stepped out in faith and experienced extraordinary outcomes. Consider Peter walking on water. When Jesus called him, Peter stepped out of the boat and onto the waves. That step was not based on logic or human understanding. It was an act of pure faith in Jesus' word. Though the winds and waves were intimidating, Peter's initial step showed that faith in God's power makes the impossible possible. It wasn't Peter's ability that allowed him to walk on water, it was his trust in Jesus. This illustrates that when you take steps of faith, you are not relying on your strength but on God's. Faith is not the absence of doubt or fear, it is choosing to trust God in spite of them. When God calls you to step out, there will often be obstacles and uncertainties that challenge your confidence. But faith focuses on God's promises rather than the problems. It clings to the assurance that if God has called you, He will equip you. Faith does not demand that you see the entire path. It only requires you to take the next step, trusting that God will guide the way. The act of stepping out, even when you don't have all the answers, is what activates God's power in your life. One of the most powerful aspects of faith is that it often begins small. Jesus said that faith as small as a mustard seed can move mountains. This means that you don't need perfect or overwhelming faith to see God's hand at work. You simply need to believe enough to take the first step. That small act of obedience, motivated by faith, has the potential to unlock incredible blessings. When the widow at Zarephath obeyed the prophet Elijah and used her last bit of flour and oil to bake bread for him, it was an act of faith. Her willingness to step out in faith not only sustained Elijah, but also resulted in a miraculous provision that sustained her household through a famine. Faith also requires action. It is not enough to believe in God's promises, you must act on them. James 2:17 reminds us that faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. When you step out in faith, you are putting your trust into practice. This action demonstrates to God that you believe His word and are willing to move forward even when the outcome is uncertain. Faith is dynamic, it requires movement. Just as a seed must be planted to grow, your faith must be exercised to produce results. Stepping out in faith also positions you to experience God's provision and guidance. Often, people wait for God to show them the full picture before they act. But God is looking for those who will trust Him enough to move forward even when the destination is unclear. When the Israelites approached the Jordan River, it was not until the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant stepped into the water that the river parted. Their faith-driven action was the catalyst for God's miraculous intervention. In the same way, when you step out in faith, you create the opportunity for God to work powerfully in your life. Faith challenges you to go beyond your comfort zone. It pushes you to trust God in ways that stretch your limits and deepen your reliance on Him. This process of stepping out and trusting God refines your character and strengthens your relationship with Him. Each step of faith builds on the last, preparing you for greater challenges and greater victories. The journey of faith is one of continual growth as you learn to depend on God in every area of your life. Finally, stepping out in faith inspires others. When people see you trusting God and taking bold steps, it encourages them to do the same. Your faith becomes a testimony of God's faithfulness, and your life becomes a beacon of hope for those around you. Faith is contagious. And when you step out, you not only unlock blessings for yourself, but also for those who are watching and learning from your example. In every area of life, faith is the key that unlocks the door to God's blessings and purpose. It calls you to move beyond what is comfortable, to trust in what is unseen, and to rely on the God who is able to do immeasurably more than all you can ask or imagine. When you step out in faith, you align yourself with God's power and open the way for Him to work miracles in and through you. Multiplying blessings is not merely about receiving more for yourself, but about creating a ripple effect that touches and transforms the lives of others. When you align your heart with God's purpose, you realize that the blessings you have are not just for you, they are meant to overflow and impact the people around you. Living with this mindset is a reflection of God's character, as He is a God of abundance who delights in sharing His goodness. True multiplication begins when you shift your focus from accumulation to distribution, from keeping to giving, and from self-centeredness to selflessness. The principle of multiplication can be seen in nature, where a single seed produces a tree that bears fruit, and within each fruit are more seeds capable of producing countless trees. This is a powerful reminder that God designed life to be generative. He blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others, and through our acts of giving and service, those blessings are multiplied far beyond what we could imagine. The key to multiplication is not hoarding what you have, but planting it in faith. Just as a seed must be sown into the ground to yield a harvest, your resources, time, and talents must be invested in others to create lasting impact. One of the most effective ways to multiply blessings is by mentoring, teaching, and inspiring others. When you share your knowledge, experiences, and wisdom, you empower others to grow and succeed. This multiplication of influence creates a legacy that continues long after your initial efforts. Consider Jesus' approach during his ministry. He invested time in teaching his disciples, equipping them with the tools and understanding they needed to carry his message to the world. His teachings were not confined to a small group. Through the disciples, they have reached billions of people across generations. This exponential impact is a testament to the power of focusing on others and multiplying blessings through intentional investment. Generosity is another critical element of multiplication. When you give freely and with a joyful heart, you activate a spiritual principle that ensures your giving will return to you in greater measure. Luke 6:38 says, "Give and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap." This verse highlights the idea that God's economy operates on generosity. When you share what you have, it creates space for God to pour more into your life. The more you give, the more you receive, not to hoard, but to continue the cycle of giving. Generosity is like a river that keeps flowing, bringing life and nourishment wherever it goes. Another way to multiply blessings is by using your gifts and talents to serve others. Every individual has unique abilities that can make a difference. When you use your talents to uplift, encourage, and help others, you are sowing seeds of impact that will grow and bear fruit in ways you might never see. Whether it's through teaching, creating, building, or simply offering a kind word, every act of service has the potential to multiply blessings in the lives of those it touches. The beauty of this principle is that it creates a chain reaction. The people you bless are inspired to bless others, and the impact continues to grow. Faithfulness in small things also leads to multiplication. When you are diligent with what you have, even if it seems insignificant, God entrusts you with more. This is the lesson in the parable of the talents, where the servants who wisely invested their master's money were rewarded with greater responsibilities. The one who did nothing with his talent lost even the little he had. This story reminds us that multiplication requires action. You must use what you have, no matter how small, trusting that God will honor your efforts and bring increase. Multiplication also involves creating opportunities for others. When you use your platform, resources, or influence to open doors for people, you are expanding the reach of your blessings. This could mean mentoring someone in your field, providing resources to those in need, or advocating for those who cannot speak for themselves. Each act of empowerment plants seeds that will grow into new opportunities, impacting not just individuals but entire communities. Finally, multiplying blessings requires a heart of gratitude. When you recognize and thank God for what you have, it shifts your perspective and opens your eyes to the ways you can share those blessings. Gratitude fuels generosity, and generosity fuels multiplication. A thankful heart acknowledges that every blessing comes from God and carries the responsibility to steward it wisely. It also fosters contentment, allowing you to give freely without fear of lack. Living a life that multiplies blessings is a life of purpose, joy, and impact. It's about being a conduit for God's love and provision, letting His blessings flow through you to reach others. When you embrace this mindset, you move beyond the limitations of self-interest and into the abundance of God's plan. You become a participant in His work, creating ripples of transformation that extend far beyond what you can see. Through faith, generosity, and intentionality, you can multiply blessings in ways that glorify God and bring lasting change to the world. So as you begin each day, pause and give thanks. Thank God for who He is, Thank Him for what He has done and for what He is about to do. Remember, a grateful heart is a multiplying heart. When you follow the example of Jesus, starting your day with thanksgiving, you won't just live in blessing, you'll become a blessing. May God multiply His grace and favor in your life.